I've written tests for code that rarely ever runs. I've gone through hours of courses to learn for projects that I've never shipped. I've written dozens of custom properties that go unused. But seriously though, one day I'm gonna need them. There are a lot of things in life that we spend time on that we think are gonna save us in the long run. But really, do they? On today's Bad at CSS podcast, Adam Argyle and I created a list of things that we think are time wasters disguised as time savers. And before we begin, we want to hear from you on this one. So drop us a comment letting us know what your biggest time waster disguised as a time saver is. And you know what? I'm going to make Adam pin the best one. So let's begin.
David, this is going to surprise you, but I'm bad at CSS again, yet again. And I'm also bad at many other things like tests and CI/CD. And I got something on my chest I need to talk about. And it's because recently I was working on VisBug, which, by the way, VisBug is like 5 years old at this point. It came out on like Chrome 55. I opened it up and started hacking on the project and didn't have to update my framework. It was one of the most liberating feelings I've felt in 5 years, where I was like, my NPM outdated doesn't matter. I don't have to go tweak and tweeze little numbers here and there to just finally get the pile of cards to stand up again. Anyway, it was really fun having no framework. For some reason, it was just weirdly a breath of fresh air. Anyway, okay, so I'm working on VisBug, and I've been writing tests on it for a long time. They're written in Puppeteer. They also spin up Chrome 55, which was part of the problem, because I was adding all this new stuff. So what I wanted was VisBug in the top layer, VisBug with HDR colors and like some other kind of cool modern stuff, and then being able to read and write these new colors. Well, read them, not write them. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so I'm sitting there, and I've done all this work. I'm like 20 hours into this VisBug extension update, and it's all working across all the browsers. Everything's good. The extension is solid, and my PR is failing on the tests, and I'm like, okay, I'll fix this test. And every test broke. Every single one of them broke. And I was like, Puppeteer, what the hell? I was like, I haven't updated any of these things. And the error is mega cryptic. Anyway, and I'm like, I'm sitting here. VisBug is done, and VisBug couldn't go out. I couldn't ship it for over a week because I'm busy, and hacking on tests at night sucks, and I only get like an hour or so. So anyway, I'm trying to fix these tests. And I'm just sitting there feeling bad because it's ready. It's done. David, it's done. The only thing stopping me from shipping is tests. And I'm like, this is the opposite of what I think tests should do. Tests are supposed to be the wind beneath my wings, telling me that everything I'm doing is secure and lovely. But the thing is setting up these tests when I originally did it for VisBug took a long time. Puppeteer and just getting all this stuff organized. I have all these before hooks that set up all this stuff so that the test writing is actually kind of minimal. Anyway, there's all this work. I've got to be just 20 hours itself into just writing tests and setting up tests and managing tests. And here are tests taking from me. They're taking emotionally from me, and they're taking time from me, and they're making it so that users can't get something because of the stupid tests. And I was just really frustrated at this moment. So then I finally fixed the test. I find out what it is. I mean, we could talk about it. Who cares? Anyway, I figure out what it is. I fix almost all the tests, and I finally fix all the tests. Now my PR, the tests are passing in my CI/CD, but I have things broken in my CI/CD. My deployment to Firebase is broken, and the API for automatically pushing my so I have a whole CI/CD build system that builds the Chrome extension, gives it a label, builds a release, tags it, pops it into the archive of GitHub, and then pushes it to the Chrome Web Store for an automatic submission on merging into the main branch. Super cool stuff that's supposed to make it so that I can be all fast and save my time and be productive. But all of these systems have sucked more time from me than they have given me back. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Is there's so many things in coding and just in life where people like pitch productivity. They pitch this ability for you to do more with less time. And I'm like everyone else. I like to be lazy. I like to do these things. But the thing is, I don't think enough people sit down and self-reflect how much they're putting into something versus how much they're getting out. And this is kind of, I've complained about TypeScript like this before, but I just want to express that everyone should be thinking about this more, because if the tool is taking more from you than it is giving, you really got to rethink that. And like with the tests is a good example, because fixing my tests, just the process of them, because it was like modules, like I have to do, there's all these dances you have to do because the test runner's in common and then you're writing ESM and just the whole nine. And I'm like, how much time have these tests actually saved me? And I could be like, well, okay, let me be kind of generous. Let's assume that like it's caught some bugs that would have taken me maybe an hour or two to do. So let's say it's saved me 10 hours of potential debug time. And then I'm like, okay, how much time have I spent writing the tests, maintaining their processes, compiling, transpiling, and doing all the stuff that it takes to maintain this thing that's saving me time? And it's way more. It is way more time than it saved me. And this is what I feel with TypeScript. I'm like, I like TypeScript. I like types. It's very satisfying to secure something. But at the same time, however many bugs you think it's saving you from, it is taking more from you than it is giving. And this is a thing that I want to talk about. Like, what are we using that's taking more from us than it's giving, yet we still continue to give it anyway? And sometimes we even say thank you to it. It's weird. What is this weird thing we do that like we're like delusional and that this thing's like not actually productive? I don't know. Do you have things like that in your life, David, where you're like, this was supposed to be saving me stuff, and then here I am babying it because it's taking.
I wanted you to have this monologue because Adam gave me this monologue the other day, and I was like, the people need to hear this. And I immediately thought this is a podcast topic because there are so many things like this in my life that I've done. And for me, I have a couple hot takes for this. I mean, we'll see how many peppers it is.
Sizzle takes.
Yeah, you'll have to grade me. It's 5 pepper take, super hot, 1 pepper take. Not so good. One of my, what I think might be, maybe 3 pepper take is CI/CD systems are a waste of time, with the caveat that you're doing it for your personal project. Because how many times have you set up CI/CD or what's that eternal joke of CI/CD system where it's like push, test, push, work,
push, test. Oh, I have so many of those.
And what's the impetus of that? Like, where does that originate from? Like, why are we sending up so many messages to get this thing to work that we know works locally? Like, why is that? And it's because locally we have access to all the source files. So if something breaks, it's very easy to find the log of it or wherever, or to reproduce or to do. It's your machine. But when you're sending it up to a CI process, GitHub Actions or Travis or Jenkins or whatever, that's not your machine. And you don't have always readily, easily access to the logs and to watching it error out. They've gotten way better at that, but there's still sort of this like step away. You're like, there's that little bit of friction or that little bit of aloofness that you don't have access. Like you can see it, but it's behind the glass and you can't really reach it. And you're like, oh, if I could see what that is doing right there, if I could change the source at that point, dive into node modules and log something in there, I could figure out what's going on. But you can't. So what do you got to do? You got to push and you got to try again. And when you are doing a local, when you're doing a personal project, building up your website or whatever, most of the time, what really matters is that it gets deployed, that it gets published, that you get to the capital D done, or even a lowercase d done. That's really the goal. And I find that CI/CD systems are very, they feel very
brittle.
Clean. Well, when they work, it feels nice. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, for sure.
They are brittle. They're very brittle. But when they work, it's there's a sense of peace and like oh yeah, that was great. But an even better sense of peace is actually shipping your project and not waiting for weeks, or even if it's just an extra hour every single time you make a change, or extra 10 minutes every time you make a change. All that friction to shipping, it's just on a personal project. I don't think CI/CD, just build and deploy on your laptop and push, you know what I mean? Like, or on your in-browser editor or on whatever, just build, push, have a great day. Run the test locally if you so choose to write tests, which Adam has shown also probably not always a great idea. Especially nowadays, you can get AI to like automate tests and stuff like that. So fine, get the AI to automate the test, get the AI to fix the tests. Like, I agree with you that CI/CD systems for personal projects. If you're doing it at scale, obviously that is massively important. That's where the friction is wanted. But for personal projects, just get out the door. What are you missing out on? You're missing out on getting it done.
Missing out on getting it done. Yeah, it's frustrating. Like, if you want to run a GitHub action locally, isn't it like gigabytes of
Oh,
stuff you have to download?
it is. I don't know how to do it. Someone sent me the instructions to do it once, and then it was just one of those things where you're just like, what's that meme where it's like, I'm really sorry that happened to you, or I'm really glad for you. Sorry, I'm just not reading all of that. Like that's what happened. I was like, oh yeah, I'm not doing that. It just seemed very complicated, and I was like, this is an Astro site. Like, why do I need to set up GitHub Actions locally to run an Astro site?
Yeah, I remember trying to set up the Firebase emulator locally too, because I was like, I'm tired of working exclusively against a database in the cloud that I can't really see or know very much about. And then I was like, nope, that's too hard. Kind of like running
No, okay.
Kubernetes locally too. You're like, ooh, this was really
So
unfun to do.
I'm gonna argue with you on that one because that's a
Ooh, is it
passion of
easy
mine.
now?
It's very in the beginning it was, I think, a little more difficult depending on like your setup, but now everything with this new port hub and everything, but that
What'd you
is
say?
emulator hub. So we have like an emulator hub that kind of
Oh,
like
you
keeps
said Port
everything.
Hub, and
I did say port.
I was like, did someone think about the name of that when they named it?
Jesus, man. Um, um,
I'm sorry. I was like, it's just there.
Okay. Well, yeah, that there saves you actually a ton of time because there's more tooling built into the local that you get on an online source. Like you get
Mm,
request based inspection for your security roles. And so
yeah, cool.
it'll tell you whether things were accessed or not. You have much better UI that it's like actual, like the console UI in Firebase is not meant for um, like developer time action. It's meant for like production. Like don't easily delete all your data kind of stuff. Whereas the local one is like, yeah, you can delete all your data with this button. It's easy because that's what you want to do a lot of times. So the emulator is definitely something that nowadays you can just run a command and you're good.
Cool. Love to hear that. And then, yeah, you got IDX doing a lot of cool things, spinning up emulators also. That's nice.
Yep. Yeah. Which I'm good. Anyways.
Yeah.
Uh,
But yeah, CI/CD, like I was at previous companies, we were automatically building with Jenkins. We had Android builds, iOS builds, pushing up to cloud services that then we had test users and beta users and then the production builds and all that sort of stuff. And just like a Webpack config and just like all these different build configurations, they need managed. I think there's like this impression that we feel like we'll set it up and then we get to walk away, but the problem is these are like layers built on top of each other. Like your GitHub action
yeah.
specifies a node version, and that doesn't age very well. So eventually you're going to update your node version, you're going to write a few modern node things, and then all of a sudden you're going to be like, why my test broken? And then you're going to sit there and debug it and be like, oh, it's just the stupid node version that's in the YAML file. It's old and needs to match what my current version is. And you're like, well, maybe I'll automate specifying what the node version is, pass some data to YAML. And it's just like, I just feel like the stack goes bigger. It's like the XKCD thing, right? Where they're like, devs will spend all this time automating something and they'll never get the time back, but they do
No.
it anyway. So it's maybe this is just like a human tendency that we enjoy the journey and the destination actually isn't what we wanted, but we didn't care because the journey was fun. Like it's just fun to automate things.
Another thing that is very much in that line is just build systems in general. Like forget about build systems even with CI/CD. I think nowadays we have this so much better because you have like Vite based systems or
V
Vite.
made it very nice. Yeah.
And I think that's really been the beauty of Vite is that if you're new to development and you first started using Vite, you don't have any real appreciation, and good that you don't, that what it's doing for you. And if you wrote a Webpack config back in the day, or even before then, you're writing gulp, or even before then, you're writing grunt, like all that type of stuff was.
I don't know. It's just so funny. I just make noises for all these build tools.
I loved gulp. Like I remember the first project I wrote with gulp, and I literally was like, okay, all right, I'm gonna like.
Did you use CoffeeScript? Did you
No, I
did
didn't
you
use
copy your
CoffeeScript.
gulp file?
I never got into CoffeeScript. I just didn't.
Oh, that's
But I will
good.
tell you this, which you will probably not like, is that I got very much into TypeScript from like the get go, when it was like
Like
announced.
NG2 or before
I
that?
mean, I was front and center on NG2. I worked on NG2, like Angular
Oh
2.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah.
built a lot of apps with NG2. That was one of the first times too where I was like, this is really hard. This thing takes a lot more work from everyone. Yet somehow everyone's telling me that's supposed to save me a bunch of time, and I'm like, none of my juniors can get anything done inside of this TypeScript system.
Oh
They
yeah.
feel just so constrained. Nothing anyway.
Yeah,
It's weird.
the TypeScript aspect because the syntax in Angular 2, or I have a whole story why it was called Angular 2 at the time, and then why it became Angular 3, and then now we're at like what, Angular 18 or
And now
something like
it's
that.
just Angular, and then
It's
there's
just
Angular
Angular.
JS. Yeah,
That was Igor
I hate
Minar,
that one.
shout
That's a
out.
really stupid thing to
What,
make
Angular
people
JS?
think.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
JS
you
versus Angular. Yeah, or whatever.
a lot of that came down to the domain name because
Oh,
the
really?
original angularjs.org was the original one, and then angular.io is the new one. Angular dev now is even a newer one, and that way, I like it without the JS. I guess that's like it's just
I just mean it's confusing to like
oh yeah.
delineate 1 to 2 with whether or not it appends JS or not
Well,
to its name. Yeah.
this is a great segue um, into a one that could be a time saver, that's or time waster disguised as time saver, is that rewrites. You think you're going to rewrite a system, and I'm just going to rewrite this thing. It's going to be easier. Oh yeah, yeah. No, this is in Backbone. Actually, if you're in Backbone, it might be worth a rewrite. But like this is in whatever, and I'm going to switch it to this framework. Yeah, that's pretty good. Or like we're still building this in SAS, but maybe we should just switch over to this. Like just keep it going. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have a sunk cost. Like the sunk
Yeah.
cost in programming is so massive, and every time you see someone have a rewrite, they go through that like dip of like, they're like, this is awesome, and then it goes flying down to that depths of despair, and they're like, okay, this is a lot more than I
We're
thought
never
it was
going to
gonna
finish
be.
this. Yeah.
There are very few cases where like a complete rewrite of something is warranted, and I've been there for a lot of them. And there are it is so and then also the merging, like that to me is one of the parts that has always been the hardest to deal with. Isn't just rebuilding the thing, like that's tough in itself, but then usually there's like, okay, now we've got the old one, how do we introduce the new one while we got this old one,
Mm,
and
yeah.
while people are actively using it? Like a lot of the easy rewrites are ones where you're just like actually doing a URL rewrite, or usually a URL redirect, where you're just saying like, hey, okay, we're just going over here now. Like those are easy, but it's not always that easy. And yeah, so rewrites to me is just, it's a huge, you think it's like, oh, we're gonna have the new system and it's gonna be great. It's like buying a new car where you're like, look at the sound system on this thing. Look at the screen. Look at the screen. You're like, it's amazing. It's the thing. It's awesome. And then like 2 years later, you step in someone else's car that is new. And then you get back in your car and you're like, well, now this looks old. You're like, this looks very old. That's like, by the time you're done rewriting it, it's old. You know?
Yeah. The shiny stuff goes away. I've seen um, massive failures in a rewrite, which the story is just so funny. I won't say which company it was. It's a very big company. And they rewrote everything to React, and they did it because they hired a new CTO. The CTO comes in and they're just like, we got to React everything. It's going to be better to hire. Anyway, they had a whole list of reasons, and it sells so well at the table, right? You sit at the table and you're like, we're going to get performance gains, we're going to get this gains, we're going to be able to hire more.
We're
The
gonna get
list goes
virtual
on.
DOM. It's DOM
We're
and
going to
it's
get
virtual. It's not the real DOM, it's virtual, which means that it's virtual. Sorry,
it
that's
is
I'm like
virtual reality. Where's Jamiroquai? Um, right? I need my hat. Where's my hat? Okay, so they start this rewrite, and this guy gets a promotion. The rewrite seems like it's going super good, and then they start sharing this new version, and bro, it's slower,
Oh yeah.
and then it gets even slower, and then they fire the guy. I'm talking like it went from this guy getting a promotion to looking like the one who's going to save the entire company to massive downhill, underestimated the problem that they were actually trying to rewrite, and just crash and burned. The whole thing never ships. They wasted millions of dollars. This is a humongous company. This is an absolutely giant company. Millions of dollars wasted. And then they're just sitting there. They're like, we're going to go back to the old. The old one is never broke. We're going to stick with it. And it was just like some Java. What was it? What's the famous Java one? Spring. There was like
Oh,
Spring
yeah, spring.
MVC, Java, and something else. With like Adobe AEM as the backend. So you can tell these are very corporate, big clients dealing with these frameworks. But yeah, I've seen them crash and burn so many times.
It's funny because a lot of times during rewrites, they will be inherently slower. And that's because not it has most of the time it has nothing to do with the new chosen shiny tool, like in React in this case. The case usually is that one, you don't have enough experience with the new shiny tool, so you're going
Yeah,
to not know how to
absolutely.
squeeze the performance out of it. You're not going to have domain experts in there. And everyone always says things like, oh, we did a big rewrite with X technology and it didn't work well. And it's like, no, let's relieve the technology out of that. Like we did a big rewrite and it didn't work. And also like when you have an app running in production, you are squeezing perform. It's been running in production and someone says this doesn't work well. So what do? You tune it, or you fix something, or you optimize, and you're doing
And it
whatever you
makes the
can.
code uglier usually. So yeah, someone
Yeah.
reflecting on it later is like, why'd they do all this? And they just don't know all of the business solutions this has solved along the way. Yeah.
Do you know Jason Miller, right, of Preact fame
Yeah.
and all? Yeah. So Jason, back when he worked at Google, I used to chat a ton, and I used to like pick his brain for tons of things.
Yeah. He's a good
And
dude.
very good dude. Shout out Jason Miller. He has all these amazing little libraries out there, like Undom. Is his
Micro
Undom?
bundle. Yeah, he's got
Microbundle
tons.
is a good one. He's got one called Mitt, which is like an event emitter. And
Hmm.
I think Undom is the one where he like recreates the DOM in like very, very few lines of code. And he like basically creates event bubbling. If I can remember this right, it's been a really long time since I looked at this. And like a do while loop. And it's like so small, but it looks like, it looks like someone's in Goodwill Hunting just being like, I'm like mapping out something on the board. And they're like, and that's how it's done. And you're like, what? But if you go and you step through it and kind of break your brain a little, you're like, oh yeah, that's how you can do all that. And he just built it, shipped it. Actually, Jason is another one of those people who's amazing. Jason once, I was building up this like little library with Preact, and he was like, no, you need to like this. And he went into a gist, wrote not only just the whole library in this like index.js, he then wrote the package.json in the gist, and then was like, here's your library, go publish it. And then as a joke, I
Whoa.
published it to GitHub, and I got like all these stars. And I was like, this is pretty much his code. Like I like merged in with the code I had originally written, but like he was literally like, here's a library. And I can't tell you the amount of times that he did that. He would publish like libraries as GIS, and he would be like, that's it, it's done. And
Cool.
is beautiful.
That is beautiful. All right. Well, here's another thing that totally other people seem so empowered by, and they spend so much time inside of these things, and I've tried them over and over, and I just hate them. And it's Notion and Obsidian. What a great place for all of my ideas to die. I'm like, I will spend half a day going, and it feels so good in there. I'm like, yes, let me enumerate all the things I'm working on. This is so satisfying to see a list. I can check things off. And then with Notion, I can really make something kind of look nice while I'm doing. So I'm like doing like a little bit of design, making sure I've got the right components to represent my data. And I'm like integrating things and connecting them. And in Obsidian, I'm writing all this markdown that's connected to other markdown. And it's like my mind map thought web of all the shit I have going on. And then it just never actually helps me do anything. It just never does. I'm like, I already knew all this stuff. Just having it in a list doesn't do anything for me. What? And then I'm just like, I spent 5 hours. These 5 hours in there will never come back to me. It's just time wasted inside of a productivity tool. How ironic is that? That the productivity tool is the thing making me not productive. This is just like TypeScript. You can spend all your time in a productivity tool and get nothing done. I can spend my entire 8-hour day typing types in TypeScript and making the types better and produce absolutely jack all zero at the end of the day. This is just so ironic. Well, how do we not sit down and think about this stuff more often? But then again, I don't know. Some people feel very good about it, and maybe they are. Anyway, so it's just me. Maybe it's just me. But yeah, I'm just like, how much time did I give you versus what you gave me back? And I'm like, this relationship sucks. This is one-sided. Anyway, so yeah, note-taking apps, productivity things. Yeah, what do you have one? What do you do with these?
Oh yeah, so you're talking to a quite a good candidate here because I have gone through a whole journey of like productivity apps, and I'm still very much on this journey. I have very much lost in just incredible amounts of time on a personal and professional level to productivity tooling, and I listen to like productivity podcasts. Shout out Cal Newport, and I'm
where's
like,
where's Alanis Morissette? Like, isn't it ironic?
and I am just I'm knee deep into this world, so I'm here for a lot of what you're saying, and but I also have some points I think to this. So when it comes to stuff like Roam and Obsidian, which I've never been a big Roam or Obsidian user because I immediately realized like this is if you're a researcher, like if you're like if your
Mm.
thoughts are this friggin' good that they need to be linked and tracked and all of that. So if you're just very academic, and if you're writing books, you're teaching like very complex things like, and I'm sure like when there's so much when the structure is needed, those apps make sense, but that's usually not the case. And also, a lot of times people are like, I'm saving links to these things. And it's like, well, how long are you going to need that link? And like, there are bookmarks. Like we have those. Like that's this is very similar to people saying like you don't need all these apps. You can create folders in in iOS Notes or in Google Keep or whatever, like without really needing anything fancy. And I use Google Keep probably more than I use anything else.
I use Google Keep too, but it's for like really dinky, weird stuff. Like,
Totally.
what's the code to my padlock outside my house that's covering
Get
up the?
access to Adam's Google Keep and get anything.
It is. It's just random like numbers. They're unlabeled though, so like I know where to go and what they are. But someone would open up and be like, "Whoa, these are the keys to all sorts of things." It's just I got to go start sticking these numbers in random places.
Google Keep, I
So,
do something that's the total time waste, and I do it all the time knowingly, but I can't undo it at this point. At one point, I started pinning those notes to the top, but
mm-hmm.
now I have to pin every single note I create, or
Hey.
it gets shoved to the bottom, and I'm like, I need to fix this. But then with every pin, that wall gets taller, and it gets a lot harder to knock down. You got to like there's no unpin all. I just have to create a new account at this point. Um, I'm
That
sure
is
it's like
funny.
archive all or whatever, but I need a lot of those. Anyways, so my whole thing with note-taking apps is that a lot of times you're using the wrong tool for the wrong job, and then there just becomes like this following behind people being like, "Oh, I need this because I need link." I'm like, Do you really like exactly how much are you getting out of that? Oh, so I punched the microphone. One of the things that I'm a huge Notion user to this day, but I have used it in like 18 different ways. And what I believe is that all we're actually doing at the end of the day is we are you're basically taking things out of your memory, your personal memory, your actual physical brain memory, and you're
Your
putting it
your
into
your
like
head
into your memory.
database.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Hey,
Your head
your
database.
database in your head is not headless. Get it?
Oh, there you go.
Stupid. Okay, sorry.
And then you're just trying to get it tracked somewhere, and that's good, that makes sense. I think we get way overblown. I have very much been there before, but what I actually found is that what it has saved me an incredible amount of time is having the discipline of understanding of like what to track and how to do it, and not going over the top on it. And
Mm-hmm.
the number one way that I've found to do this is that if you have, and I've been wanting to write a blog post or do like a YouTube video on this for years because I very much believe in this, is look at your browser tabs. At any given point in time, how many browser tabs do you have open? It's like, big on running joke. For a lot of people, it's like, you can't even see the favicon at some point. You know what I mean? Just everything gets squished in. And each
Yeah.
one of those not only has a memory task on your computer, but most importantly has a memory task in your head, because each one of those tabs is open in your mind because you don't want to lose that tab, and you have to like cycle through the tabs or search through them and try to find what you're looking for. And what each one of those tabs represents is an open task in your mind. And you're basically saying, I have to do this. I need this. This is something that is relevant to me right now. Well, what does right now mean? Right now usually means, I don't know, multiple weeks of sitting around and not watching the video, not doing the thing, not reading the blog post, all those things. And what I've found is that you can do something very simple, like I do with Notion, or you can do it with a Google Doc or whatever, a text file, is basically say, kill your tabs, keep 7. 7 is a perfect number. 7 digits in a phone number, we can remember 7. 7 is something easy for us to keep track of. Once you go to 8, all right, that needs to be saved somewhere else. Doesn't mean you're not going to do it. Just put it in a doc, like underneath its category, tasks to do, video to watch, blog post to read, and just paste it into the doc and close it. And then revisit that doc. Keep that doc open as one of your 7 tabs. And then that way, it doesn't have to stay open in your brain. It just goes into there. And then there are times where I think that everyone's like, well, what if I'm like trying to search how to do something and I need to keep track of all these tabs? Well, that's called spiking, just like how traffic spikes. In that case, it's fine. You are allowed to temporarily spike in your tab traffic, but then you're going to clean it up afterwards. You're not going to keep them all around. And if you do need to clean them up, then you need to save them somewhere. So that's my whole thing, is that that's really all we're trying to do at the end of the day, unless you're an academic, you're a book writer, the structure matters. You're building a course, you're doing all these things. Then sure, yes, I imagine that's very important. But for our general purpose life, that's the main goal. And I don't know if I'm gonna hit a sore spot with anyone listening.
No, that was deep. I'm just nodding along over here going, yeah, man. Nice.
So that's what I do. It's my 7 tab rule. I always want to write a blog post. It's called like kill your tabs. And because it's just all of our problems come from our tabs.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of my tabs are prized tabs where I'm like, I don't want to restart you, Chrome, because if these don't open, I am unsure of how to recover. Yeah.
So
interesting.
I also reminded myself of a very spicy. I think this is a 5 pepper take, actually.
The spice
of what I'm about to say, and it's funny that someone like me is saying this. I think, in very caveated, that courses can be a massive time waster. Because in many cases, don't get me wrong, I have taken courses that have changed my life. Shout out Learn UI.design. Phenomenal course. Knew nothing about design. Yeah. I needed to be spoon-fed. I needed to be brought into the world. I had no idea what I was doing, had no idea where to start. Perfect. How many courses have I watched about a subject I'm pretty good at or very familiar with? A lot. And what should I have been doing instead? Doing it, building it. Like if I watch a course on CSS Grid, that's probably a big waste of my time. I should probably be building complicated CSS grids and failing and trying and fixing it and sending them to you and crying and asking you why it's not working, and then you patting me on the back, giving me a snack and saying, it's okay, we're going to fix this. It's going to be fine, David. Like, that's really what I find to do. Like, I'm always looking at a course, like, in a way where I'm like, this is it. This is how I'm going to know it. This is how I'm going to get smarter, because that person's smart and they're going to teach it to me. And then I'll just totally know how to do it. I've gone through courses and I still, when I go to do it, it's just as hard as if I didn't go through the course. It's hard to do things. And half the time when we're watching through courses, we're trying to avoid the thing we know we should be doing, which is just doing
there's the key.
Task. Yes. And you're just saying, like, well, I gotta learn through the course, or I'd probably waste so much time getting this project done. No, you're going to learn by actually putting the boots on the ground, typing the keystrokes, turning them into pixels, doing your thing. Like, that to me doesn't mean don't buy courses for things you don't know about, and doesn't mean don't make courses. Like, if you really don't know how something works, if you're new to something, yes, courses are invaluable, but don't just buy courses like just because you're like, hey, I'm trying to build a project with this thing and I kind of know how it works, and this course will make me even better. No, what will make you even better is doing it. And that's my stance on that.
I heard something recently, so many good comments in there. And you were mentioning, like, you actually have to do the work. I've been summarizing this as reps. You have to put reps in. And a lot of people don't want to put reps in. They want to go instantly from not being able to do something to be able to do it really well. And they just don't want to put the reps in. I don't know what that is about. I mean, I kind of get it. We're lazy, and it can be scary and it sucks to suck. But anyway, that's what reps are for. And I had a recent rant about music and its comparison to coding and stuff like that. Anyway, maybe we'll save that for another episode. But I also heard recently that course completion rates are abysmal.
Very bad.
Abysmal. I'm talking like, so it's almost like courses are this perfect grift where what you do is you make a phenomenally powerful marketing page that's just like, when you take this course, you're going to be the strongest that you've ever been. It's just like you fill someone's head up with all this potential of what they get by the time that they exit it. And then what you really ask for, and then you're like, for $150, that could be you. And then so they're like, well, yeah, I would love to just give you money and then instantly be good. And so all these people do it because we're so easily tempted by fast track shortcut wins to the finale without putting reps in. And courses are just like that, where so many people buy them. So many people buy a gym membership and then never go.
It's the same
It's
thing. Oh my
really,
God, it's
really
the same
similar.
thing. It's when you look at a course and someone says like with over 60 hours of content, you have to ask yourself, okay, that's a great value for like whatever it is. Like if this is something you're new to, sure. But in a lot of cases, you have to ask yourself 60 hours. Okay, if that's 1 hour a day, that's roughly 2 months of doing this. And that's Saturday and Sunday. That's
Yeah.
that's on a busy Wednesday when you don't wanna. And that's an hour. When you're tired and you had a bad day full of meetings, full of whatever, full of CI/CD systems crashing on you and gas not working, and you've
Fixing
spent
all the
most
things that were supposed to make you faster to have time to do this
right,
course. Yeah.
spending all your time linking all your notes meticulously together in your Rome and your Obsidian. Like it's hard to then say, I'm going to go sit here and spend an hour on this thing. And that's 2 months worth of doing it. And then what is that to? An hour a day, which is a pretty generous amount of time, to be honest with you, if you have a pretty busy
Yeah.
lifestyle. And that's 60 days. That is where you're saying, what you don't know what you're saying to yourself is that I will start this project in a minimum of 60 days from now, because I got to learn this thing, then I'll start this project. And there are many cases where like, if I wanted to learn guitar and I didn't like want to go in, and I would probably go to like a guitar teacher or something like that. But if I wanted to learn in my own house, I would buy a course and that would be very valuable. But what am I doing as I'm going through the course? I'm learning how to play guitar. You really need to learn. You need to ask yourself, like, how much of this is academic and how much of this is abstract versus how much of this is, doing and getting it done. And this,
Yep.
I feel also so important to say that I say this out of just complete hypocrisy and pain of like, please don't be like me. Don't be like me who has like just stacks of notes of like courses. I literally am like next to a massive stack. Oh my God. Actually, here, Adam, you entertain the viewers for a second. I got to grab this one
Oh
real quick.
yeah. No, I'm hoping that you go grab a whole bunch of productivity books, because I just love making fun of that in my mind, where I'm like, oh, you're gonna sit and read 3 hours of a book, which means those 3 hours you did absolutely nothing to learn how to be productive, at which point you're probably just going to buy another productivity book and you're never going to be productive. You're just going to read about productive habits. And I'm like, if you don't put the reps in, there is no productivity. It's just so funny, the irony of these things. Okay, what you got?
This right here is, for anyone can see, these are my notes
It's
for
like a
a
composition notebook that you got handwritten stuff in there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is a good example. I'll have to say this is a course that did change my life, or made my life much better, and which made me be like, "This is courses for everything." This was probably one of the first big ones I've ever done. This is, what is it, CS 149 or something? It's like the Stanford Learn iOS course. This is all
Hmm.
Objective C. I have this
Wow.
whole notebook. Is
You
this
studied
I have
Objective C? That's like one of the ugliest languages. Whenever I open it up, I'm like, my God, how do
inspired
I
by
get out
small
of
talk.
this place?
You know what's interesting? If you look at the discourse of Objective C, everyone's always like, Objective C is so ugly and blocks are gross. Blocks are gross. But like in all the stuff and syntax weird and message passing, who likes that? But then if you ask people about small talk, which is like really where Objective C came from, people are like, oh, small talk, so ahead of its time. Just an amazing language with such great constructs in it. And it's like, oh, come on. And you look at the syntax and you're like, anyway, sorry. I
Oh,
never
dude,
got
no,
that.
hold on. That's directly a thing I learned this week. That okay, as a software engineer who doesn't like the front end, which is pretty much everyone except me and you, and like there's like a select few that are like CSS, I'll do that task. Most people hate it. So okay, consider a scenario where you've got TypeScript and you have CSS or Sass, and the CSS and Sass has a linter in it, as well as some other checks that will add underline red squigglies for properties that you're not looking to use, things that aren't applying. There's like helper things inside of your CSS file, just like in TypeScript, where it's like, hey, you have an unused variable. This declaration doesn't do anything.
Right.
Hey, this type doesn't match. Red squiggles, whatever. So here's what I'm hearing from two very large companies that's happening is that the developers will happily pacify all the red squiggles in TypeScript, right? They're just like, oh, yeah, don't worry, TypeScript, I got you. I'll spend the time to figure this out, whatever. And then they go to their CSS and they see red squiggles and they add an ignore line. Or even worse, they do whatever they can to not make that happen, but like they get really wildly creative in ways that work around it. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why is one file with red squiggles important to you and the other file with red squiggles not important to you? You are your own worst enemy in one file, and in the other file, you're just like what is going on here? What is this trend? This is just like I've had projects in the past where we deployed, and for a client, 100% test coverage on an Angular app. And we handed it over. I think I've even said this on the show before. Anyway, we handed it over, and all the devs that received it were like, thank you so much. This is so great. And they turned off all the tests on day one. They commented the entire concept out. And we're just like, we're not going to use these. They're slowing us down. We don't understand them. That's too much or whatever. And I was just like, well, this is some weird behavior from engineers.
Actually, sure. If you go to most like GitHub code bases of like large open source projects, you should go to like the tests section. You will find lots of commented out tests throughout everything. And it's usually like to do person. It's like, figure out why this kept me from getting this PR submitted.
I thought about doing that for VisBug. I was like, I should just turn all these off. No one cares. These tests aren't helping me anymore. And I was like, oh, I'm going to solve it.
I had like a Safari driver die on me once, and it killed all the tests for like Safari ones. And I was literally like, the passing on every single one, but the Safari one fails on everything. And it wasn't the test. It was because I run it locally and it all passed. But then when it get up to CI, it would fail. And then everyone is for this big library I'm working on is like, when is this release coming out? When is this release coming out? And I'm like, as soon as I can figure, this is a freaking JavaScript library. And I'm like, as soon as I can figure out the Safari driver, yeah, you all will get this library with these features you've been asking for. And I realized in this moment, I run them locally. Everyone's begging for these features. They pass, they work. The driver's out of date. We're going to ship it without.
Push it real good.
Right. We disabled that little option on the matrix, and all the tests run because they're the same test. It just runs on a different side of the matrix. And we just say, hey, we're just disabling this for now. And then we went and fixed it later, or got someone who's much smarter than us to fix it later. And everyone, is happy. We got it done. And then and nothing broke. We just kind of, we didn't say these tests only work because they happened on this one machine somewhere in the cloud.
Dang. Well, I mean, yeah, back to CI/CD for VisBug. Yeah, me and you met because the action broke to push to Firebase. And literally, this is the conversation that we have, everybody. So I'm like, David, I'd love just like 5 minutes. We'll jump on a call and let's fix the action. It's just a deploy. It's a static site. I need to deploy it to Firebase. And he goes, yeah, dude, easy. No. Anyway, we get on a call and we're like, oh, we pull the thread. It's this classic scenario. You start pulling the thread. We're like, oh God. Oh no, here we go. Still pulling string. And we're like, dude, we gave up, everybody.
We did.
We gave up. I decided to just hand drag the folder. Oh, no, what? I did it from the command line on my own machine, right? I just did a Firebase deploy. So we wasted 25 minutes trying to debug, figure out how to get the access keys, how to get it into a spot, and do all, because we had all these hoops and jumps to go through that I was just like, I don't care. I just want this to be live. And so I did a Firebase deploy on my command line, and within 20 seconds, the problem was solved. And I'm like, look at all this time we wasted for like, it's just really frustrating.
For the record, people, this is like a very bespoke kind of system that we're working with, but aren't we all? like,
Yeah, I
um,
think that that's kind of what this stuff means by like it's all layers and stacks on top of
yeah,
previous solutions that if you change anything in any of these configurations, there's just
yeah.
this massive trickling effect that it's hard to see in the moment. It's easy to add. So you know what? Here's a fun CSS and computer science thing, an overlap is people really hate that CSS feels append only or add only, that as you want more styles, you have to go. This is why Tailwind has a very great benefit of it doesn't grow,
Yeah.
or it tends to not grow. It reaches a local maxima,
Well,
which
it
is
grows
nice.
horizontally, not vertically.
Nice. But then if we look at our systems and after we set up all this infrastructure, so at first you have a Node.js file and you've got like some front end assets and these things can work along. But then you get into these corporate scenarios where everybody starts layering in automation, they layer in linters, they layer in tools, and we start to harden the product that we have. But what we're doing is the thing that we hate about CSS. We are doing an append only growth thing that doesn't really have an end. We start to add code quality checks. Then we start to add huskies so that we have pre-commit checks. And this everything about our app starts to get, and these are just like layers of fat on top of the actual thing that we want to ship. And it's just so weird again that we don't really self-reflect on this very often about um, we think we're hardening it and we are, but we're like simultaneously making it brittle and hard to change. It's like we're all working towards making a Titanic, but we want to fly a wind sailboat.
Mm.
I just anyway, that was
Yeah, we
the
don't
thought.
want to. We don't value the time that it's going to take, or understand, or value our own time. We just value where we want to get, but then we don't understand what we're actually undertaking until you get there. That yeah, when we are like very deep into this podcast, and I realize we haven't had a single CSS. Like, I mean, so I actually do. I want to bring up a CSS one. One thing that I think is a total time waster disguised as a time saver with CSS is color. Because color is exponentially complex. Where
Oh yeah.
when I was first learning design, Meng To of Design Code, back before Design Code became this really cool, awesome, big tutorial site, he wrote a book called Design Code. And one of the things that he said to do was pick 3 colors. And it was about designing, like specifically iOS apps. But in general, he was like, when you're
Hmm.
designing an app, just pick 3 colors. He's like, literally just 3 colors. That's it. And don't go beyond it. Not even tweak any hue or anything like that. And he's like, you got to keep that discipline in there. Eventually, yes, you're going to need to tweak the hues and do stuff like that. But at first, just 3 colors. And when you really stick to that, it allows you to go so much faster, because with colors, if you're like, oh, okay, I got to make a button. All right, I'm going to make this button. It's blue, but what's the hover state? Should it go lighter? Should it go darker?
You should
Oh,
always
should
hover
I?
and increase contrast, everybody. Always hover and increase contrast. And always put a label on your icon buttons.
PSA from Adam.
PSA, sorry. I'm like
More you know. Um, but you have all these decisions for all these variant states of a single color. So like a blue isn't just blue. A blue has all these different states of its original blue, and of any color for that matter. And colors are also are cohesive with each other, hopefully. And so they have to work and play together. And on top of that too, you start thinking about light mode and dark mode. Oh, that's another spicy take I have. I think color modes, or color themes of your site, like light mode, dark
hmm
mode, also can be a huge waste of time depending on the situation. um, but with color, you are sitting here saying, like, creating all these different variants of color as things go on. And what can happen? The colors can change, or whatever branding, theming, all this stuff goes and changes, and then it makes everything complex. So when you're
Yeah.
building things, like really having the discipline of like, we're just picking these 3 colors and we're just starting these things out, is so valuable, because you get to build the actual scaffolding, the actual core, like, body of the website, and it gets to be itself before you're actually decorating it with these fine details. And that's because that's really what these variants of colors are. They're fine details. They are important details. I'm not saying don't
hmm
do them. I'm saying trying to define what you think your color is up front is a waste of time. And even trying to define light mode and dark mode up front is a massive waste of time. So one thing that I get, and I don't know how Seattle is, but I live in Washington, D.C., which is very much the real world
Hey, we're both in
comparatively.
Washington.
Yeah, there we go. Both named after George Washington. Fun fact. PSA from David. The more you know. Um, but when I lived in the Bay Area, like every time you talk to people, all talks were like super like tech based. I know people to this day where if you're like, oh yeah, something with ChatGPT, they'd be like, oh, what's that? And you're like, you know what that is? And they're like, no, what is that? And you show it to them and they're like, oh, cool. It chats with you. Like there's no like, wow, amazing factor. They just say, okay, all right, moving on with my life. And they also won't know that the site can move from light mode to dark mode. And you're like, no, you see, if you click the sun button, they're like, oh, I just thought that was a picture of a sun. Like, I didn't know if you click the whole thing changes. That's cool. I will never click that button again. I will never configure that again. Now, if you're making for developers or more advanced users, then yes, absolutely. It's massively important. Those are big opinions of whether people like light mode or dark mode. But for a lot of sites, it might just be an exercise of you just wanting to build light mode and dark mode in order to do it. And if you want to talk about accessibility, you should be able to make a light mode or dark mode site very accessible no matter what. So in my opinion, I just think that with color, there are ways where it's amazing, and there are also so many ways where it grows out of control.
Yep, I can totally empathize with that. And I'm sitting here nodding along, going, 3 colors is great. I'm like, how many does the open props normalize ship? And I'm like, there's three surface colors, 2 text colors, and a brand color. So it's 6. And I like that, especially 2 text colors. That one I think is clutch. You have your text that should always and absolutely be readable, and then one that you want to subdue a little bit.
Yeah.
So you got text color 1, text color 2, and that's like it. With surfaces, I like to have 3 layers, but yeah.
Yeah. But phase 1 for a site, you don't need that subdued color, or phase 1 for building it. Like you don't need to carry that around with you until someone goes, hey, that sub label would look great if it was subdued a little. And then you apply it like that right there. And then now you're letting the magic happen rather than forcing it on everyone. Everyone's like,
yeah, you're right. So
the rabbit comes out of the hat. Come on. Just, you want to be like, hey, look, I got it. If you tell someone I'm going to pull a rabbit out of a hat, they're going to be like, I know, I've seen this trick 1,000 times. But if you walk up to someone with a hat and then pull a rabbit out of it, they're going to be like, where the frick did the rabbit come from? Like that is the difference,
That's awesome. Okay, so let's thought experiment this really quick because I want to combinatorially explode your statement here because you're onto something, which is okay. So let's say, you got open props with 6 colors in light mode, then dark mode, another 6 colors. Then you have like a high contrast theme, 6 more colors. Then you want to do let's see, what are other variants in there? So you get your high contrast. I mean, you could do like a low contrast, but that one's not as important. Your forced colors. Okay, so there's another set of 6. Well, no, forced colors is out of your control, so you don't have to worry about that one. There's forced light and forced dark. You got your HDR, so you could do an sRGB color set. Then you could have an upgraded DVD color set. So you got your VHS color version, you got your DVD color. Each of those could be split into light and dark and high contrast and low contrast. And yeah, the list goes on. You're right. Color is out of control. Even if you set up a really robust set of custom properties, just getting that established is a lot of work.
Also, what I find is someone who's also deeply
colorblind also.
Yeah. Someone who is but also when you're applying those high contrast themes, the colorblind themes, all those type of things, or like if there's accessibility modes for your site, starting with 3 colors allows you to get to those paths a lot easier rather than introducing color chaos all at once of like, this is what we want the pretty polished version of the site to be. And then, oh yeah, we need to tweak this now. We have to tweak this now. Well, it's much easier if you start with 3 and then tweak rather than start with 46. And that sounds like a lot, but that is not a lot. Like I have worked on sites where the root selector has just, oh my gosh.
Yeah, Material has over 1,000 tokens in there. They're like, and the names of them start to get really, really long and specific.
I namespaced like custom properties. Like dash dash
Mm-hmm.
color because I wanted to get the autocomplete out of them and to know I
Yeah,
was
that's
typing
how
right. Yeah.
OpenPops does it too. Yeah.
And so I could see the colors drop down because there's so many that I wouldn't be able to remember what it was. So all colors are prefixed for dev time searching.
I have. Let's talk about CSS system colors because you could start your entire design and not pick a single color and handle light and dark. Um, I really like these too, not just for prototyping, but a lot of times you can make a really nice looking site with these. So let me pull up some of these so that I can
It's time to go to
represent the ones that I'm
Adam's
not
demo
remembering.
corner.
Yes, I love these. So before I even look at the list, here's the ones that I use a lot. There's a system color called Canvas. That's the
Okay.
background of the page. And then it will change between a light background by default or a dark background based on the color scheme property that you have. Oh, we also have the new light dark function, which is cool
Mhm.
and confusing. Uh, Anyway,
Like most things
and
in
it's
life.
and it ties right into this color scheme flip. So if you're going to flip the color scheme, this is a way for you to like integrate with the browser's choice of a user agent style sheet. Okay, so there's the canvas color represents the background of the page. Then you have canvas text, which represents the text color of the page. Those two alone get you really, really far. But you also have things, well, we have like color coming down also, where it's going to be accent color and accent color text. So these are things, if you specify the accent color, you now have a keyword that you can use, and you get access to the keyword that contrasts your accent color given to you for free by the browser, which is cool. There's also link text, which is a cool
Mhm.
one that represents the color that the links are. There's also highlight, and I like to use that one because it's whatever the user's system highlight color is. And so you just get to use it in a way, which is really fun. There's a bunch of them for inputs. So you have field, which is like the background of the input, and then you have field text. There's even one called gray text. So if you were wondering if how do I make a subdued color in this, use gray text. Okay, so let's see what else is in here. Oh, there's mark and mark text for like highlighting things if you've got them selected, like it's yellow. There's selected item text. So this is
Yes.
like look at all these, and then there's visited text too. So you have all these different system colors that you can really get super far with that are automatically adaptable to the light and dark themes out of the box with no client side switch. It just follows the system setting, and you just need color scheme, light, space, dark on your HTML element. You're good to go.
Because good design comes from constraint. So if you can use less to produce more, it's good design. Like I worked in the early days in Firebase startup mode, which by the way, on Tuesday, I will be 10 years at Firebase. 10 years at one place.
Wow, dude, that's
Everybody
amazing.
was like, you shouldn't join that startup. It's so risky. 10 years later, I'm like, well, it's pretty freaking stable.
You're like,
Um,
hey, I got something in my pocket for you. Shabam! It's a middle finger.
I think
Fool!
I
Try to
think
tell
most
me what
people
to
weren't
do.
they weren't hating. They were just like, that sounds scary.
Yeah.
It was scary. But it's good now. But the one of the early the VP of UX, shout out Alex Wolf, he once had this really good sort of lesson he gave me in at work one day where he was like pulled up Photoshop and he's like, look at all the stuff you can do with Photoshop. It's like amazing. But you look at that side drawer in Photoshop and it's hiding a lot. You know what I mean? We know that
Mm-hmm.
is just like the tip of the iceberg when it comes to doing stuff in Photoshop. It feels tough just looking at it, especially if you have no idea what you're doing. Then he pulled up on this iPad, I can't remember, some drawing app, and had 8 tools on it. And it looked amazing. And it looked like I could just
It's
take it
probably
out of his
paper by
hands.
53.
I
Yeah.
think it was that. Actually, not you say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt like I could have taken it out of his hands and just started going at it, and pressing
Mm-hmm.
something and just building and that right there shows like they were like 8, you get 8 tools. And of course, you're going to produce different things with each, but it shows if you ask someone on the street which one's designed better, most people I imagine would say the paper one, the iPad one, that one. I like that one. I will use that one. The other one scares me. And I
Yeah.
think that's why, because it's constraint. There's less going on, and I think a lot of times we want to add more because we're like, more is better, more is good. And you know what? More of your result is good. but more of just more is not. And sometimes we just think we add more effort, more this, more that of it, it's going to make it better, but it's not. It's like, it has to be like it's the think smarter, not harder kind of, or work smarter, not harder kind of process. So that's very much like, if so, go ahead, build a website using only system fonts and only system colors. And I bet you, if you know something about design, you'd probably do a really good job than someone who does a whole full custom job on top of it.
Yep, I have a way I like to think of things, which is it's really easy to add more. This is what
Yeah.
we see with npm. It's so easy to npm install something. It's so easy to bring in more. This is kind of like, again, I guess, the layers that you build up around your system. It's so easy to add more. It is very difficult, and it takes a mentality and it takes a skill to deliver something great with less. And that's kind of why I like to call myself a sushi chef on the web. Is I very much am giving you minimal, delicious meals, where a lot of other people are giving you, a big plate. Like you went
Yeah.
to Cliffhanger. No, it's not Cliffhanger. Cliff Jumper. Crap. What's that one that's got the humongous
Oh, I don't know.
dishes? Oh, I can't
You're,
remember
you're
it either. I
definitely
think
not
it has
talking to the right guy here.
Cliff in the name. Who cares? Anyway, or is Cheesecake Factory, where you're just like, who is this for? You just gave me 4 ginormous slices of chicken. I'm like, do I look like I'm going to eat that? It's just like, geez, Louise.
Oh yeah, you go to a
Anyway,
3-star Michelin restaurant, it's always the big white plate or the big black plate. It's always one solid color, and then the little bit of decorated
little
food in
thing
the
in there.
middle. Yep.
Yeah. So it's weird. It's like somehow we all know that that's better, but yet we're constantly cramming more into our UIs and more into our apps. And I had this problem with managers all the time too, where they just kept saying yes to everything. And so the UI went from being something nice and simple in the beginning to just getting cramped and crammed because they thought more would bring people in. But the reality is, like, you need to do less really good, not more shitty. Anyway, yeah.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end a podcast other than that. Like, that just sounds great. You just amazingly faded us out there. So I am very, very interested, if you are still listening deep into this podcast, to let us know what are things that you have done that, and this isn't actually your typical engagement farming at the end of the podcast. You don't know how to exit the podcast. You just say, I know what to do. Ask the people what they had. So maybe you'll get a comment, and you can leave your podcast now. This isn't that. It follows that formula, but I am truly, truly interested. And if you write down something, I'll respond with something to prove that I truly care. Not that my response matters all that much, but I do. I actually am very interested to see what people think about or list. Oh my gosh, this is a time waster, but everyone thinks it's a time saver. So let us know in the comments, on Twitter, on wherever. I'm very interested in this. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining this episode, and we will see you in the next one.
Visit the Planet CSO podcast.